Hello there. We are checking out a deck that I ended up bringing to regionals this past weekend, and I had a ton of fun with it. This is the budget Tenpai, no Charmies necessary here. We had an absolute blast at this tournament. It was not too big, only an 8-round tourney. I was severely unprepared for it with regards to one, the siding patterns and just kind of getting familiar with that tournament structure, and then two, not having snacks on board. Very, very challenging. So yeah, I figure what I'll do is I'll give you all the deck list that I brought here and had some success with, and then talk a little bit about my round matchups to kind of get a lay of the land for what I experienced at this regional at least, and can go over those rounds as we go. But yeah, so starting off here, the list, I was pretty happy with most of it. Obviously, there's one thing that you'll probably notice that's not quite right. So the Pydra Chandra ratios were fine. Genroku was fine here at 2. Fadra at 2. This should have really, the second one should have been a Dora Dora, and I just didn't have access to it at the time, so I just played with a double Fadra. It did come up once, but it didn't end up winning me the game, so in my opinion, it's still not correct to have 2 of these in your deck. Then the rest of the ratios were pretty standard with the triple, Kaiman, 1 summoning, obviously the terraforming and prosperity. And then this was a little bit of spice that I realized was actually not that spicy. A lot of people were on Kash this past weekend. But yeah, the set rotation giving me another access point to the Sangen summoning, plus the single copy of Wraitsoth. So there were times where I would open one of the field spells plus terraforming. Felt great. You could do your Kashtira stuff first, then go into the Tenpais. The Kash, are specifically Fenrir, is great going first or second. I did not really give too much consideration to a unicorn inclusion, because then I would have had to play a bigger Kash package by having a target for unicorn to search. Maybe I could have just played it, for the extra deck rip. But I was actually really happy with Fenrir. It really did its job as really like the main deck thing that I needed in my deck to go first or second, plus increase the odds of my engine hitting. And it did just that. Many times this did get sided out, especially if I knew I was going second. I'm just throwing in more hand traps, or depending on the matchup. This was the first thing to get sided out, but it was really nice to have access to this. Then something also not as conventional is the second Bestial in the Druis Worm for Tenpai main deck. Like I said, we're not doing the Charmies, so this really came up as another point of interaction. Many people weren't expecting it. The problem was I lost my last game, my round 6, by not properly siding these out. I'll go over the matchup a little bit later in the video, but yeah, this was an error on my part with the siding. I still did like them in the main as extra hand traps that did have some relatively high value, especially Druis Worm when paired with Nibiru. But yeah, and then obviously the best hand trap in the deck, the Shifter, was great. I saw it 2 times, and both times it did win me that game out of the many games that I played that day. Ash was pretty solid, I would say, overall. Have no complaints running this at 3. Nib at 2, I liked this. Many people were not expecting Nib, which was great, because then I could just drop it. And there was only one time where I played into a Talents, but I still ended up winning that match. So it was not even that crushing. I think they saw I had a bunch of engine in hand, so they weren't going to stop it necessarily. They just took a board breaker out, but I still broke the board. Imperm was fantastic. Loved having that at 3. Droplets were an interesting one. They did end up winning me a game and thereby a match, but I think this can stay at 2. I definitely I never put the third one in from the side, so I think that can definitely get removed. I think having this at 2 was perfect. I didn't need or want any more. Lightning Storm was great when I saw it. Same with Regeki and Duster. All of these were really nice to have. There's definitely an argument to go heavier on the hand traps to be better going first or second, but I really, especially with the Feather Duster, that was a great main deck inclusion. Same with Lightning Storm, I would keep that. Regeki was great, and it did its job. So I personally didn't have any problems with just keeping the 5 breakers. Droplets a little bit more of a flex spot, I would say. That was it for the main. Down in the extra deck 2, double Biden, of course, and then all of kind of the standard one-ofs that you would play. Never ended up making Samurai Destroyer or Meteor Burst, although when I was playing the Mirror, it would have come up. They just scooped before I could make it. Black Rose was all right. Same with the Ruddy, and then Trident, and of course the Transcendent. And then for the Lynx, we ended up playing a slightly bigger one just because I wanted access to Dark. It didn't end up coming up for me wanting to make it, but that was definitely an option that I wanted to give myself. And then the Typhon was sneaky. There were a couple points I could have made it, but it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game. So Flex spots here for sure. There was a good reason for me to consider playing the Raging Phoenix World Sea Dragon kind of combo line to kind of pull off a Link OTK. I think I might consider that if I was to play this deck more going forward in the future. Then down into the side deck here, we had a 1D barrier to line up with the crossouts. Then the rivalry, which this didn't make it in, but it should have. I definitely should have sided this. This is one of the kind of those things I struggled with the siding patterns. Double Eclipse. Eclipse was theoretically good. It was a board breaker that would have broke a lot of boards. The problem is it also plays into Ash, and everybody's maxed out on that. So I go back and forth. My opponent had made a Fucho against me in addition to the Fire King Arvata, the negate guy, whatever. I think it's Arvata. But yeah, they had both of those. And so when I tried to Eclipse, they did have the Ash for it. So I couldn't really interrupt their board the way I wanted to. But in theory, this thing did do a decent enough job. So I do like Eclipse in the side. Crossouts, of course, mandatory. Same with the Cosmics. I would definitely drop the Droplet. And then, of course, for the extra hand traps, these were all great. The Veilers really did their job this weekend, and the third Nib was great. I think having access to all three was very helpful when I needed it. So, yeah, not too many complaints in the side deck besides the Droplet, but overall, yeah, the deck really performed well. With regards to my tournament experience, like I said, it was 8 rounds. So the first round, I got matched up with a Tenpai player, so it was a mirror match. And I lost the dice roll, so I had to go first. And I made a seal with the Sandgen summoning up, and I think I had either an Imperm or a Droplet set, and they couldn't break it. So I was able to beat them on the crackback on turn 3. And then the second game, they also forced me to go first. I think I just made 2 seals and beat them. Regardless if it was a clean 2-0 against Tenpai. I can't remember if they dropped a Charmy on me or not. I don't think they did. But yeah, that one was pretty quick. I also had Ash for their Kaimens, so I was able to cut them off from engine pretty quick. I think they had a much heavier hand trap build, and so I was able to see my engine faster than them, and by the time they were trying to get to it, I had the Ash when I needed it. I opened Ash both games, which was really great. So then round 2 was an interesting build of Sky Striker versus Snake Eye Sky Striker primarily. So Sky Striker was a very small package, but the engine was very interesting in that it allowed them to access some cool striker interruptions. They used a Widow Anchor against me pretty effectively, Shark Cannon as well. But yeah, game 2, oh my gosh, yeah, I wrote this down. I opened Shifter, Ash, Imperm, Nib, and Kaiman. Yeah, what a disgusting opening hand. Once they were under Shifter, that game was quickly over. So that was a quick 2-0. And then round 3, I played against Snake Eye Fiendsmith with no Fire King stuff in there. Pretty solid game 1 with lots of interaction. But game 2, I don't remember who won or lost that one. But I do know game 3, when it came down to it, it was getting pretty close in time. They were only able to end on, I want to say it was like a sequence plus an IP. I think I impermed their sequence, so they couldn't, their Fiendsmith sequence, so they couldn't make the Omni Negate guy. And then they just had the IP interruption, and I was able to stop that with a Droplet that I had. So the Droplet definitely came up in that game, and then I think I had some back row hate to deal with their one imperm set. So that was a pretty clean round 3. And then round 4, this was against Snake Eye Azamina, no Fiendsmith stuff in there. Opponent bricked game 1, they charmied me double Perulia, but it didn't matter. I was able to clean them up and finish the game from there. And then game 2, they made me go first. I definitely probably should have saw that coming, but regardless, they pulled off a pretty impressive OTK. So we pulled it to game 3, and this was crazy. So they had this Azamina thing up. It was, oh gosh, so many have been released. Yeah, it was this thing, this Lago thing that allows them to add an Azamina or Sinful Spoils card from their deck to the hand when it's fusion summoned. So I imperm this. And then while Imperm is on the field, they use Final Bringer of End Times, which is target one monster you control and one card your opponent controls, destroy them. So he was going to dodge the Imperm because I wouldn't have a target to negate. So I chain my Veiler to it, and then this chain resolves where this Azamina card he has is negated, so he doesn't get his search. Final Bringer destroys, and then Imperm doesn't have a target. The problem was, and this is really on them because they would have been able to get an extra effect here where they could have grabbed a Sinful Spoils spell if this thing was destroyed by battle or card effect. So they forgot that trigger. But what's crazy about that interaction is any Azamina deck should absolutely be playing Final Bringer because this interaction's broken as hell, at least in the side or whatever. But what an insane interaction. And of course, I came out the other side just because the opponent was like none the wiser or like forgot in the heat of the moment or something like that. But whatever it was, disgusting interaction. I've definitely have some reason to consider Final Bringer in other decks as well because it really does have this cool way of dodging interaction from your opponent plus being able to disrupt. Oh, so it's basically the Final Bringer of the End Times. Okay, so this is just the beam that Veruda shoots out of his head. That's kind of crazy from a lore perspective. But yeah. So anyways, that was round 4 with Snake Eye Azamina. I had the Veiler to stop them, and then they forgot their search, whatever. So I won that game. And then round 5 was against Rescue Ace. And they had the perfect play. They sequenced their plays perfectly to where I could not imperm their Turbulence without them being able to dodge it. And then I just made a flub by not giving myself access to Chandra early enough in game 2, and because both games were pretty grindy. And so because of that, I just couldn't make a synchro play to save my life. And this was where I had an option to go into the Typhon. But the issue was all of their monsters besides Turbulence were under 3k, and so they had the Book of Eclipse guy or the Book of a Moon guy as well. So honestly got just outplayed for what it's worth. But yeah, really solid Rescue Ace opponent. And then for round 6, this was probably my nicest opponent. Really liked this guy. He was on Fire King Azamina, no Fiendsmith. Shifter carried me in game 1. And which, it is what it is. He said he was honored to be the second person to get shifted. He was obviously a little bit upset by it, but whatever it was. I then couldn't break their board game 2 because this was the guy who ashed my Book of Eclipse. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And then game 3, this was the kind of the Achilles heel of my experience here. I left these things in here against a Fire King Azamina opponent. And yes, there was like some reason to leave these in, but he never even went into his Azamina stuff in the later games. And so game 3, I forgot to side these out, and both of them were stuck in my hand game 3. And so that was very, very rough. And there's an argument to say maybe I would have kept the Magnamut. But yeah, honestly, I think both of these should have probably got taken out for more, hand traps or something to slow them down, because I definitely had combo, but they were able to put up a board that I just couldn't break. And then I also kind of learned more about the Fire King Sanctuary and their XYZ rank 8. I wasn't paying attention to them actually setting that rank 8 up by putting the 2 level 8 bodies on the field, and that thing does a lot on its own as well. So there was definitely some learning to be done there, but all in all, and then of course round 7, I just had to get some food, so I just dropped after that. But it was a really, really solid experience. I would love to go back, maybe play maybe a little bit more of this format. I definitely want to play when the new Orcus cards drop. But in the meantime, that was my regional update with some budget Tenpai. Hope you all enjoy.